Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's going to be our first ever Friends of Figma Maker Hour. So we'll be kicking off very shortly. We'll just wait for a couple more people to hop in as they're coming in from, I'm sure, other meetings throughout the day. But feel free to pop into the chat and say hi and where you're joining from today. I'm in Sydney. The weather has turned very quickly. It's very cold here now. But yeah, give everyone a couple more minutes. So yeah, feel free if you're coming in from different meetings to quickly grab a drink or a snack and get settled in for today's session. Hey, Abraham. Hey. We've super excited for today's session. We've got George here today as well. I think the other thing we were really curious about is, so Maker Hour is all about sharing practical tools to kind of help us all in our workflows throughout the community. So we're curious if anyone's got maybe a new tool that they've started to use that's helping you in your work at the moment. Oh, Jitter, I haven't heard of that one. I have a bit of a silly one. There's like an app that I saw that's like a focus app. And you have this little bean that knits things if you don't touch your phone for a certain amount of time, and then you can decorate a room. Cool. So yeah, please feel free to keep dropping tools in the chat and saying hi. But I think we've got quite a few people in now, so I might kick us off for today. So before we dive into everything, I'd first like to start with an acknowledgement of country. So I begin today by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which I am on today and which we're meeting on, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are joining the session today. So yes, it's time to kick off our first ever virtual Maker Hour. I guess I'm a little bit of a new face for the Friends of Figma Sydney community. So to very quickly introduce myself, I'm Sasha. I'm a senior product designer at Unloan and also one of the community volunteers here at Friends of Figma Sydney. If you've come to our in-person events, you might have seen me around. So looking forward to connecting with everyone today. Just to very quickly introduce our community leaders as well. If you've been to a Friends of Figma Sydney event, Pierluigi would probably be a very familiar face. He's a design manager at Service New South Wales and heads up our community here in Sydney, as well as helping out with the Melbourne Friends of Figma chapter. So if you're joining from Melbourne today, be sure to check out their events as well. We also have Simon, who is a design manager at Atlassian, and he'll also be a familiar face for anyone who's based in Perth, because he also organises the community events there. So whether you're joining from those cities today or planning a visit, be sure to check out the Friends of Figma website as well as our LinkedIn to see when the next sort of in-person or virtual events now. They're a really great way to connect with your local product design and engineering community. So speaking of community, if today's your first time joining a Friends of Figma event, first up, a very warm welcome to you and a very quick introduction to who we are. So Friends of Figma is a global community with local impact. It's created for more than just designers. It's for creatives, problem solvers, and cross-functional product teams seeking inspiration and growth. Through local meetups, online events, and community-led workshops, we offer a welcoming space to share ideas, learn best practices, and build connections that matter. So whether you're here to deepen your skills, expand your network, this community is designed to support you in every step of your journey. And without further ado, We'll move on to our agenda for today. I'd like to welcome George, who is our very first ever speaker for Maker Hour, so a new virtual series that we're running here at Friends of Figma Sydney that spotlights industry voices sharing practical tools, real stories, and insights to help our community grow their skills and build better products. So a little bit about George. George is a product design lead and the creator of Checklist Design. And a little bit of a fun fact, George was actually one of our first speakers at our first in-person event in Friends of Figma Sydney, and kicking us off today for our first ever Maker Hour. So we're very grateful to have you here, George. Throughout today's session, he's going to do a deep dive into the deceptively simple yet powerful tool that is design checklists. And I know that I'm very excited for that. We'll have time today for some Q&A at the end. So if you have any burning questions you want to ask George, there's a little Q&A panel that I'm going to open up soon. Make sure you add any questions in there and upvote any ones that you really want to hear answered. But that's all from me. So I'll hand it over to you, George, to take us away. I think we might be having a bit of audio issues.
How's that now?
Yes, we've got you now.
Sorry. All I was doing was just saying thanks everyone for joining. Very cool to see just over 120 folks here to listen to me talk for an hour about some design stuff, some checklist stuff, and maybe building some tools as well. But firstly, before we get into the checklist stuff, I just want to talk a little bit more, tell you a bit about myself. So I'm a product design lead, as Sasha said, currently living in Melbourne. I've been a designer for about 8 years now. I've worked across a number of startups, scale-ups, the occasional agency role, and I've had the chance to really see the end-to-end of design, that being particularly in the startup roles where you tend to wear many hats. So I've done some design, done some brand work, some marketing, some socials, but most importantly to me, I've had the chance to do lots and lots of product and design system work. Important to me because I feel like that's where my main passion lies. But currently, for the last getting to 2 years at the end of this year, I've been working independently with companies to help them tackle either the most interesting or challenging problems that they're facing, whether it be helping a company go from 0 to 1 with an idea that they have, maybe helping them scrappily put together some proof of concept that they can take and use to raise some money, or maybe a more established business that needs to take on a real thorny, complex problem that they're facing, that they need to solve to help them either pivot or maybe scale. But today, more specifically, we're here to talk about the projects that you see in the top right and the concept itself of design checklists. Right off the bat, I'll say I think this talk can hopefully benefit a range of designers for different reasons. I think if you're a junior or mid-level or just exploring the world of design, I think hopefully this can help with your day-to-day approach in your work. And if you're a senior, a lead, or a manager level, then I'm hoping maybe there's some anecdotes you can take back to your team afterwards. Or maybe no matter what your level is, you're interested in just building your own tools and want to learn more about that. And if so, make sure to pop questions in for the Q&A later if you're specifically curious about that. So nonetheless, let's get into it, starting off with the problem that I tried to solve with checklists. So starting off with this beautiful piece of design work, a lovely complex flowchart in FigJam. This was a piece of work I was working on a few years ago where this is representing the journey a user will go through for a product. The funny thing is this is actually only about 10% of the full flow. So only 10% of it, and you can look at how it begins to unfold. It's so many edge cases, different journeys, ups and downs. And at the time, I had to also think about the website. I had to think about rebrand that was going at the same time. So overall, what did I begin to experience? The good old information overload. So we know information overload is the point to which your brain can only handle so much. And it's not a case of whether you're good at storing information or not. I don't like the idea that if you can't hold hundreds and thousands of ideas and thoughts and edge cases and components all in your head, that makes you a bad designer. That's just a very silly way to look at it. Every person at some point will have too much going on in their head to be able to focus on the right thing at the right time, which naturally leads you to forget things, or what we like to just sometimes call human error. You make mistakes you normally wouldn't. And for myself in this scenario, you probably already see where this is going, where this was me as a mid-level designer trying to take this all on at once. And I'll walk you through my own experience or my own ways of how I learned the lesson the harder way. So for that project, I started off with the login page because it was simple, it was straightforward, something I'd done 6, 7 times before, and it's a login page. It's a warm-up screen, I guess you could say. And this was that page. I spent about 15 minutes on it and thought, I've got other things to solve. There's too many things on in this project. I'll just do this, give it a once over, and call it a day. And on the surface, it looks fine. Like, it says login, email, password, button, job done. But that's the thing. It's actually missing some critical elements that I certainly missed by moving too quickly. If I'm a user and I want to reset my password because I can't get in, where do I do that? What do I click on? That's missing. What if I stumbled upon this page and I'm not a user and I wanted to sign up instead of log in? Where do I do that? What if the email is wrong? What does the error state for the input look like? What does this look like on mobile? So it's a couple of simple questions that I could answer off the top of my head, but somehow there's no answers on the screen for what I designed. Now, was I a bad designer for missing them? I probably thought back then, yes, but now in reflection, no, I really don't think that is the case. I think it was when you consider the additional context that the flowchart you just saw, all the information and data points swimming around in my head, I had simply just been overloaded with information to the level that I wasn't finding myself at the normal level I conduct my design work. You could argue, why not just do one thing at a time at a slow pace where you have no deadlines? But probably about halfway through saying that, you knew that that's just a fantasy scenario for the way we work in our teams. Of course, you have deadlines, stakeholders, fires to put out, all in the midst of designing an end-to-end journey. So what's the alternative? I thought at this time, how do I cover my tracks in the future? And that's when I made my first checklist. So I wrote it up in my to-do list app at the time. And then on top of login, I did a few more for some standard website pages like contact us, 404, everyone's got to have one of those. And since I was at an agency at the time of doing this, the repetition of products was quite present. So I had to keep designing login pages for new companies, new brands, new projects. And so shortly after I took this on board in my next piece of work, lo and behold, the improvements were clear. Even when I was deep into the trenches of a rebrand or an app redesign, I still moved quickly without sacrificing quality, because the benchmark of what was an ideal best practice experience was outlined in this list for me. So as long as I followed my checklists, I felt so much more assured in the finer details while I continued to think about the bigger picture of my work. So after finding something that worked well for me, I did what almost every young designer tries to do, at least a couple of times in their career. I started a side project. It wasn't my first ever project on the side, as we do love to tinker, but it was the first to directly relate to my own day-to-day work. And so in my spare time, I set off to turn this into a full website. And just briefly, so I don't embarrass myself too much, here's some quick iterations from the early days to what it exists as now. So this was version 0.1 on Webflow. Probably the less said, the better, but you have to start somewhere. This was version 1.0. I launched with this on Product Hunt, which it's actually funny to see that it only had 7 checklists. I feel like the standards for personal projects have probably raised since then. And this was maybe going on to about 5 to 6 years ago. So yeah, quite a while. And I took a break from working on the project, just having full-time work, not feeling like I had the right idea of where to take things next. Until a couple of months ago, I got more time to myself through freelancing, and now was able to recently relaunch this new version about 2 to 3 weeks ago. So this version I recently rebuilt with Framer, started from scratch on thinking the visual identity and how it can look and feel and behave and work best for as many designers as possible. So the tool now covers a variety of areas, including website pages, design system components, UX flows, and the aim is to keep scaling that further and further to work in almost any project a designer may have. So that's a lot of focus on the project, building it, trying to solve a problem. But I do want to take a step back now and talk a little bit more philosophically about the 2 biggest values that I think design checklists can provide you in your work. So I think design checklists primarily unlock 2 things. They take care of the routine essentials, and they help you think outside the box. For the first one, there's areas of design you repeatedly execute, whether it's a new idea, project, or team. There are things that are so repetitive that it can welcome this idea that you don't need safety nets for them. You've designed a login page 10 times. Surely by the 11th, you can do it with your eyes closed, right? Well, say in that 11th time, you've got 50 other screens to worry about, then the repetition can only get you so far. Checklists for me cover the basis so you can get through the standardization of certain experiences quicker without needing to look behind your back. You can just design a login page, use the checklist as that reference and inspiration, get that done, and you've saved a lot of time, but you've also prevented yourself from missing critical things that you have to keep going back and forth on. You don't want to half design a page, hand it off to an engineer, they come back with 6 questions, you've got to solve those, they come back with 2 more questions. Granted, they may come back with more questions, but you want the questions to be more interesting. You don't want them being, you forgot this, and you forgot this, and what about this? So that's covering your routine, I find an essential advantage using checklists for. So with routine covered, let's talk about thinking outside the box. And I think what I mean by this is to get to the parts of the design that really have that critical, innovative, unique feedback, input, to what the design comes to be. So for instance, checklists in health and medicine are an essential part of their process, down to confirming and checking someone's name, their date of birth, and why they're there that day. That's partly due to very rigorous safety precautions and ensuring all the right information goes to the right places. But you could also argue that it frees up their mind to focus on the abstract, which is usually the more difficult piece of work. The more time and effort a patient intake form takes, the less time and effort they have to make a diagnosis, ask the probing questions, let their mind investigate and troubleshoot. And the more room they have for those moments, the likely the better the outcome they'll arrive to. And I really think that's the same for design. Going back to a login page again, a login page is a standard process. It's not going to be the thing that makes or breaks your product experience. It's one piece of the puzzle. There are always, I guarantee, more innovative, interesting things later down the line that maybe are less standardized, but are inherently then more interesting to work on and figure out. And if you crack those screens, if you crack those moments of delight for the user, that's where you win. And you do that by taking care of the other stuff, taking care of the things that aren't reinventing the wheel. You want to get to the more interesting pieces. So if you're worrying and thinking about every single element on a page, screen by screen, how are you meant to see the bigger picture of what you're creating and really create something meaningful? So on that note, let's go back to that login page I showed you before. Here's where we started. And when I wrote out my checklist, I realized what I was missing. And I thought, I better go back to this and fix it up. So this is looking a little better. It's not much difference, but if anything, that's somewhat the point of what a checklist can service. It can uncover those small but meaningful things that don't come to mind straight away. If I bounce back and forth between the two, you can see we've got a reset password link in this new one, a sign up link if the user doesn't have an account. We also, in this project, the PM asked or suggested, can we have a faster sign-in flow rather than just email and password? So we included Google in that as well. And then we also slightly improved the copy at the top to just be just that little bit more interesting instead of just login. But the thing is, we don't have to be done here. We've covered the routine essentials, as we mentioned before. And that's the fun part now, because now we get to think outside the box, because the checklists, aka the essentials, are done. But now we explore further, and we ended up finding this to be a good spot for our login page. We realized hey, we're going to offer sign in with Google, we can offer Apple too. And then in that case, let's make those the priorities and log in with email as the third option, but it would take you to an email and password input field. And then we go back to the second option and then back to this one. You can see all the extra space we had, and we thought, let's talk about something in the product. Let's talk about the latest stuff that we're shipping. Maybe in the future, we could put a testimonial there, a blog post, just having some sort of content. And that is a nice opportunity to excite the user before they log in. Or maybe for someone who stumbled upon the login page and wanting to sign up, they still see this and are incentivized. These kind of things are the fun, meaningful, interesting things that can differentiate your product that you don't get to until you've taken care of your routine essentials. And by getting through that routine quicker, you get more room to play in this kind of field. And you can see here, I've technically not gotten rid of any essential items. Everything there that needs to be there is there. I've just now been able to take it to that next level and have some fun, explore, and enjoy more stuff that is above more of the standardized work. And I've now got an example from more recently, earlier this year. And to walk you through this screen a little more, this was for a company that their main, this is an existing company where they wanted to introduce a new feature to use AI to generate content for people and hiring teams to use this content for recruiting top talent. So they could they could generate different types of content, and they could generate it off a different persona, meaning a different role. Maybe the content's for an engineer, maybe it's for a head of, maybe it's for a CEO, as interesting as that would be. And they can have a prompt to give direction on the content. So for myself, I'm entering a new product, trying to figure out how to manage and navigate this. And you can see there's about 7 or 8 different actions on this page. It's quite clean and polished here, absolutely. But this all looks nice and polished now, but the starting point was quite messy. And so I took a step back and wrote out a checklist for just this page alone, which eventually over time translated into this level of detail for the checklist. So you can see on the left, I've got my parent items and my secondary items. The parent items are, for me, like the key top level properties. So you can see I've got title, meaning the name of the content, the type, meaning the drop down, which says email, the persona, and so on. And then the secondary items are items that tie into that property. If the primary property doesn't exist, then the secondary can't with it. And so I set up the checklist. And again, before I got to this design, there were about 10, 12 other different versions of this screen that had the items checked, but it didn't feel exactly right. So I covered my essentials with the checklist. And then that's when I explored to think outside the box. I moved things around. I think I had the actions on the right side, the content in the middle. It took a while to get to this point when I thought, what if it's all full width and the content is on the right side? So I don't have to click a different button to go into this edit mode on the left. What if they're both available? And to get to that point, to figure out the right prioritization and layout for this page, along with all the other states to consider of what happens if I press edit or change or regenerate or edit again, it's allowing me to ensure I've got exactly what I need the entire time. And so for this project, I did the checklist for nearly every single page in the end. It was quite a complex product. And I thought this was interesting to share as a way of showing there are certainly your standardized checklists that you can go through for the typical pages like your login, but that doesn't mean that you're limited to when you're working on something that's completely new and original. Again, your information overload can happen just like that. Imagine thinking of this screen without any checklist or content around you and just picturing it in your head. I think I'd have to lay down after 5 minutes. You wouldn't really be able to see that clear picture and think of the bigger picture as well. And so this is how you can also incorporate just a simple notes or checklist next to your Figma designs as you go along. And it's always your reference point. Have we got this? Have we got this? The bare essentials. For me, I found I often did this when it was in the earlier stages. So I'm talking with a product manager, or I'm looking at the spec and I'm looking at the requirements for the spec. And so for this screen, there was, for instance, that the user can select the type of content, but they can change it later on. Same for the persona. And so that's where I thought, okay, I need to show the type and the persona, but it needs to be editable. How do I do that? So at those earlier points, that's where you can start to get the information and start to put this together before you actually go, hang on, what am I going to do? How am I going to put this all together? And so that comes with one overall takeaway, besides the what two things the checklist can unlock, which is, for me, a designer can't do their best work if everything is in their head. I feel like this is just a very human thing, a human behavior. It's why we are always trying a new to-do list app every 6 months to get us motivated and organized and working, to help us with our day-to-day and write things down. And yeah, I do think there's a limitation as to how much your brain can actually hold and keep. And to write that down, to list it all out, is by no means a fault or a limitation of your own abilities. You've got to just get that stuff out. And I'd be interested to hear as well how many people approach it in that way by talking to someone. I feel like the amount of times I'd be stuck in my head and I would lean over and chat to a developer, chat to the PM or someone and just go, hey, like, I'm a bit lost on this. And by simply even just saying it out loud to them, I would crack the case and I'll be like, okay, I know what I have to do. Unfortunately, that's not a bad thing, but I'm needing to take someone else's time out of their day to write that down verbally, but it does the job. And so it's about figuring out what works best for you. I think for checklists, what always worked well is the natural structure that it gives you, rather than rambling on in notes and then going, hang on, what am I meant to be doing here? It forces you to think more practically, which actually perfectly takes me to this quote from a really good book, The Checklist Manifesto by 𝗠ป์𝗿 𝗛𝗂𝗿, where he basically breaks down a couple of industries that utilize checklists. And I really, really love this quote from him, particularly the point in the middle, where overall it says a good checklist, on the other hand, are precise, they're efficient, to the point, and easy to use, even in the most difficult situations. They do not try to spell out everything. A checklist cannot fly a plane. I think that middle point is so important from his book. And it's the idea that checklists cover your bases, they cover your tracks, but ultimately you're in the driver's seat. A pilot will do all the checklists to check that everything is safe and ready to be flown. But then when that plane takes off, it's them in the seat and they're driving, and it's up to them to make choices still. But they are making those choices in the best possible setup and environment for themselves. And it's a great way to think about that for yourself as a designer. These checklists cover your bases, but ultimately, they're not going to design your product. They're not going to design your app from scratch. They will get you to a certain point, but then it's over to you. And that's a thing to embrace and be excited about, that you get to take on the fun, ambiguous work that lies ahead of you. And on the last line too, I really like that good checklists are above all practical. I think I love the word practical. I talk about being practical all the time with design, particularly when you're freelancing with startups, scale ups. They want to hear practical, where for me, that is just the definition of, you know, being thinking about things creatively, thoughtfully, and intelligently, all with a way to move forward. How can we move forward as smartly and safely and securely, but as fast as possible? And balancing all of those dimensions. So, on the note of practicality, my last part of this presentation to talk about is what's coming next for checklists. And I wanted to make it more practical in the future. It's right now a website, and that's nice that people can pop over, visit a page, cross-reference their designs. But in the spirit of Maker Hour and talking about tools and building and those things, especially doing that as a designer, the last few weeks I've been building a Figma plugin for Checklist. So the idea is that you've got your designs in Figma, and then right beside you, you've got the actual checklist that you can tick off. You can view, you can tick off the items. So this is the login checklist. You can view either just the items or you can see the description or suggestions for each of those items, depending on how you like to work, how you like to run. And that way you've got it natively integrated into your workflow. You can just have this next to you, go, have I done this? Tick, tick, tick. Yes. Oh, I'm actually missing this and that. And so I've been building this with Cursor. It's been an adventure, an up and down on prompt engineering and navigating all of that. But it's been super valuable. And yeah, as a maker who wants to do their own work and their own ideas and projects, it's been a great exercise and very valuable way to go, hang on, what do I want to do next with checklists that would actually be meaningful and go in the right direction? So that's what lies ahead. That's all that's from me for now for my slides and my content. I actually breezed through that. We're at 2:34, but honestly, I'm very happy with that, because if anyone has questions about checklist design, my career, I'll throw out there if you have questions on that. But then also, more importantly, building your own stuff from scratch as an individual and as a designer. Yeah, I'm happy for all kinds of questions to be thrown my way, because we've now got the time to give, hopefully, some more thoughtful, in-depth answers for them. But yeah, for now, I'll hand it back over to you, Sasha.
Thanks so much, George. That was really great to hear. And I really loved the checklist so you can think outside the checkbox. And I think from the chat, a lot of people really resonated with that as well. We do actually have quite a few questions, so I'll start with the ones that have the most votes. But if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A panel. And if we have time to get to them, we will. So kicking off with the first one, we have from Mai, really love this thought process. Do you often revisit your checklists? And is there ever a time you believe a checklist could be out of date?
That's a really good question. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that I didn't touch this project for about 3 to 4 years, like revisiting the content. And when I did, there was so many things that appeared that I was like, is that even a thing anymore? And maybe some small examples are like with that login page, for instance, there wasn't, I'd say only 4 or 5 years ago, there was maybe sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook, but besides that, there wasn't sign in with Apple. I think also there's a more growing pattern of companies or products using a like send a one-time link to my email instead of a password at all, and so that was out of date as well in that regard. Even a team page or a search results page. That was actually a good one that popped up last week. I had a search results page as a checklist, but as I was going through some products, I thought, is that a thing much now? Because if you after this go away and use search in your regular tools, the search typically has immediate feedback and is showing items for you to click. There's not many that you search and then it takes you to a results page. It's more of an immediate, like the power bar, for instance, in tools like Linear or Notion. You just trigger that, search for something, and then click an item. So that was really interesting to experience. But yeah, it's always worth revisiting what you have set up as your items for sure.
Oh, amazing. So the next one we have is from Colin. So taking care of essentials so that you can think outside the checkbox is such an interesting concept. What's your process for deciding when a best practice template is adequate and when to push the creative boundaries?
Ooh, these are good questions. I think to decide about using a best practice template, I think what helps me decide is if I can translate like the screen I'm doing or the design I'm doing, if I can immediately draw that back to like a very standard practice, I'll use that checklist. And so maybe on a dashboard page, there is a table. And so I'm like, okay, where's my table checklist? Or a chart, where's my chart checklist? I can see components, or if I'm doing a design system, a button component, for instance. So I think I see what can be covered by the best practices templates in terms of a component level, or if the page feels similar or familiar enough, and then cover those bases and then go for the creative boundaries. I think there's always on any page, even if it's a completely new original page in like a mobile app, something there will draw back to the best practices of something of some sort. It's just how much of that page do you want to take and use? And maybe a good example might have been like Uber when they first were designing their app. The concept of showing a map and navigation already was present, and the idea of like map UI did exist, so there were best practices for them, but the creative boundaries that they had were showing a car picking up somebody, showing the destination and pickup point. Back then, that would have then been for them the creative boundaries to push, because they're like, no one else is really doing this. How are we actually going to do this? So I think that's a good example of where the line can be drawn.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think we do actually have a career one from Michelle, who's asking, curious about your move from lead designer at Eucalyptus to independent lead designer. What made you make the move and how are you finding it?
Yeah, for me, it was doing what I'm doing now is always part of the career trajectory. I loved the idea of working with different companies. I strongly feel that there's a lot of companies out there that they either hire a designer and to way too early, and then they're suddenly doing all these, they're doing customer support and marketing and design. And I do think in some ways that can be a benefit for a designer because you get to learn the end to end of the business, but sometimes it can be tough because you're not really getting to learn and excel in your discipline that you want to be thriving in. Or the opposite is companies will have design debt, build and build and build, and only once there's enough debt, then they can hire a full-time designer. But then that designer's coming into a mess of a website, a broken design system or non-existing design system. And again, that can be good because you've got clear problems to solve. But I like to be in a position where I can challenge that and be in the middle ground and go to companies, hey, let me work with you for a short-term period, come in, get what needs to be done, and then I'll be on my way. Last year I did a podcast and talked about the Mary Poppins style of it, like coming, like kind of just floating in, waving my wand around, and then like being off. It's like my job is done. I'm on to the next house. And I really like the aspect of that, like the diversity of work that it gives. And so I said it was a career, like I always wanted to get to this point from a career perspective. And I think the biggest benefit that I got out of Eucalyptus with its experience and working, like leading a design team and working with so many designers, is I luckily had the progression to that next step of my career accelerate through my time there. So rather than going from Uke to another role and then doing something like this, I luckily felt ready enough to make that jump and do it now. And year and 3/4 in, it's not so bad.
We love to hear that. The next one we have is from Madeline, which is, how did you start out with Cursor? Did you find that you need some development background to help fix bugs? And I'm assuming this is with your Figma plugin.
Yeah. What do I think of Cursor? No, I do really love Cursor. It actually really makes me yearn for something similar to Figma, where if I'm in Figma and I want to, and they're certainly doing like AI stuff already now, like replacing content. But what I love that Cursor does is it is a great conversationalist with things. Like I think there's less a development background, but more of a like your ability to articulate and instruct what you want Cursor to do, I think is so much more important. I guess that in another way, it's like prompt engineering, like the ability to convey what you want. And maybe a good example is in my plugin, if I just say, this thing is broken, fix it, it's gonna run free. It will start changing code everywhere. The tool can be so much like a child. I listened to a really good podcast from the head of design at Anthropic that he described it as like every chat with it is a newborn, like is a child discovering the world. And so you could say to a child, can you go get me this pen? And it'll bring back 7, just because it's like, I saw all these pens and I thought you'd want them anyway. And it's the same with AI in the way you communicate with it. You can't just say, here's a thing, fix it. You've got to be like, I saw that this behavior, like when I clicked this button, it didn't do X and I want it to do X. It instead did this. And even instead of just saying, here's the problem, fix it, I would describe the problem. I would then ask it to break it into milestones. And then I would ask, can you confirm you understand what I want to do before implementing? And I get it to play it back and go, this is my approach. We're going to do this in 3 steps. Does this sound good? Yes or no? And then I give it the approval, go, okay, let's proceed. So yeah, I think development background helps if you want to fix the smaller things like your CSS, for instance, your styling, or just understanding how React apps work. But I think so much more of it is the way you talk to Cursor, how descriptive you are, and how you've got to sometimes have a stern voice with it. Otherwise, it will just go wild and do its own thing, and you don't want that.
That's a really great analogy of, like, ask me to get a pen and I come back with 7. I've definitely found that as well. The next one we have is from Manjari. In your process, would you move on from checklists to page templates, which would be reusable scaffolds for other pages?
That is, I mean, for the like for checklist design itself, that's something am working on, like the idea of like having templates. But absolutely, you're spot on, because I think what you're alluding to there is the idea that you have these templates already have everything from the checklist implemented. So instead of designing a login from scratch and referring to the checklist each time back and forth, you've got a login page template where everything, the bare essentials are there. And so I just take that template and use that in another project, maybe give it a new coat of paint based on the branding, and then add in any other specific parts of the spec that are included. So that's absolutely the next phase you would take things, especially if you're in a bigger company, you're reusing screens a lot. You maybe want to have your login, like you look at your login screen, your design system, check all the items, and then tell everyone, okay, this screen we always use. This is our template. Like, please use this. So yeah, it's a spot on suggestion as to how you would move things forward.
Yeah, no, that's great. The next one we have is from Win. Simple yet great idea. Would you say this would have a place in design systems to further supplement documentation, for example?
It definitely could. I definitely like the idea of checklists, using checklists to build out design system components. And that means that part of the documentation could be like, these are all the properties that we have ticked off. So as we know with like variants and variables and properties for, let's say, a button, you may have different sizes, different colorways, icon, no icon. That is all within the Figma properties. So you may have a checklist in the documentation saying, these are all the items that are here that we have ticked off. So it's kind of a post checklist of what you've done. It's documenting this is what we've done. But if you're building a design system, that would still work really well to show those have that checklist first, and then go, okay, does this button have all the dimensions and variations that we need?
Yeah, something can be a bit complimentary. Cool.
Yeah.
The next one we have is from Lara. So, how do you personally advocate for design decisions when the team or organization isn't yet design mature?
It's a good question. We're getting brought into the broader philosophical now. It's good.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think something that can help is if you've got someone in leadership or someone in engineering even that has that design maturity, you kind of want to latch onto their attention and get them to vouch for you. So I've had that in the past where I've known that the lead engineer is very much about the design details and cares about those things. So if I'm advocating for something, I took it to them first, talk to them through it, and they're like, I love this. This is great. This sounds good. Let me take it to the CTO or the head of engineering. Similarly, at Uke, one of the founders there was 4 founders, and one of them was definitely more creatively like experienced. And so when it came to bigger design decisions that would affect like much more of the wider design team and the product team, I'd go to him. I'd go to him and go, this is what's on my mind. Let's have a coffee or go for a walk and chat about this. And I'd have his buy-in, which meant then I had a buy-in from someone within leadership to help advocate these decisions. If I went to someone who I knew would just knock me down straight away, that's exactly what would happen. I'd be back at square one. And so part of personally advocating is getting your champions within the business to help advocate for that, because typically the more voices that are surrounding this idea and thinking it's a good practice, that tends to just gather more steam in a community environment than it does of, one person can only shout so loudly, whilst 3 to 5 voices together speaking is more impactful than the one person shouting.
Yeah, no, 100%. The next one we've got is from Willem, which is, what made you decide to jump between multiple startups, agency, as opposed to staying on with one?
I mean, it was very intentional. I to walk through it, like my first role was at a startup. I was there for 2 years. And so I went to an agency after that because I only had one product in my portfolio. I was worried about being pigeonholed into fintech or just not having enough variety to speak to in future places. And I thought agency is a great way to get frequent, diverse work. Um, and so I went to agency for a year. I did a few other startups after that, but also the reality is of like jumping between startups agency is in one place I was made redundant. In another place, when COVID hit, it affected our funding and the business had to close down. So there's so many ways that jump can happen where whether you decide it or you're forced into it. For me, with Eucalyptus and Wiser before that, I had done a few startups and that agency. And then I was thinking, I've been a sole designer and I've learnt and upskilled like how to be independent and make things happen quick and scrappily be a team of one and get stuff done. But I haven't actually worked with a team of designers before. I haven't bounced ideas off them. I haven't had a mentor within a business, like a head of design or a lead designer. All those things added up to then go, okay, a scale up is the right approach for me because I think a scale up was still a healthy amount of speed that a startup would be, but I could get some leadership and work with other people. So that's what led to Wiser and Uke. Now I'm back to the team of one, but that was after many team wider experiences. But that's definitely what informed me along my journey throughout the way.
Oh, amazing. I think we have time for one more question. So I'll go with Optus with the upvote. Other than Cursor, what other AI tools do you find useful in your daily workflow?
What other ones do I use? I'm not sure. I do really love Claude. Like I use Claude within Cursor. I think it's the best coding tool. Oh, actually, I do adore Granola. I love Granola simply because of how simple it works. If you haven't heard of it, it basically takes notes and records your meetings and then summarizes the notes of that meeting experience. And I'm just a big fan of things that do one thing and do it extremely well. And it just works super seamlessly. Gone are the days of you join a meeting and have like meeting.ai robot also join the meeting and someone saying, sorry, that's my note taker. Like it just works really, really seamlessly. I think those two off the top of my head are nice. I definitely have some hotter takes of other tech introducing AI into the tool maybe a little too early. It's like not mature enough, but it's riding the wave, it's riding the trend. So you can understand it from a business perspective.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think we're all slowly starting to incorporate more AI tools into our workflows. So thank you for that insight, George. And thank you so much for joining us today. I personally, as a lover of checklists myself, I really loved what you showed us today. And there's a lot of people in the chat as well that are saying thank you and have taken away a lot from it. So thank you as well for being our first speaker again for Maker Hour.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone to coming along, taking some time out of your day. And I'm sure we're all ready to start using design checklists in our workflow moving forward. So for the Sydney community, before we wrap up, I have a save the date for you for our next in-person event. So the Thursday, the 18th of September, it's going to be at Dovetail. So keep an eye out on our LinkedIn page. Otherwise, you can go to the Friends of Figma website and look up Sydney to sign up for email notifications for when registrations go live for that one. So looking forward to hopefully seeing some of you guys then. Before we wrap up as well, if you're interested in giving a talk or hosting an event at your space or sponsoring one, we'd love to hear you. So you can use the QR code, give it a quick scan on the screen to get in touch with us. Otherwise, we've got our email, figma.sydney@gmail.com. Keen to connect and continue along with Maker Hour and sharing ideas with our community. Thank you, everyone. Yes, the session today was recorded, so keep an eye out for the link. We'll probably post it on LinkedIn, or you might get an email about it as well. Thank you from me and the Friends of Figma Sydney community, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. See you guys.